We are the Earwood family. We are out of Cartersville, Georgia. We're sent out of the Cloverleaf Baptist Church in Cartersville, Georgia. I'm also with Macedonia World Baptist Missions. And as preacher mentioned to you, we have already been to South Dakota, and we planted a church there in the town of Chamberlain, Calvary Baptist Church. And we lived there for 7 years, and then we come back. And until I had direction of a town to go back to, I went back to work and resigned from Macedonia. But now God has given us a door of opportunity to go back and to plant and establish another Bible preaching church. I know that when I was here last time, I shared this story, but I like to share it with folks in case some of you were not here, because there was something interesting that happened to us. When we got to Chamberlain, I was meeting in a woman's living room, and I was working on my garage to turn it into a church. That's where we met for 3.5 years. But while I'm working on that garage, I'm not having Sunday meetings yet, just on Thursday nights in this woman's living room. Well, everybody knew who the Earwood family was in that small town. I was the guy that talked funny, and I was the guy that was starting a cult back there in my garage, okay? And they said, man, he's one of them Baptist pastors. He's from the South, you know, and all this. That was the popular opinion about me. Well, this guy calls me up one day, and he says, I am the chairman of the board of the Lutheran church behind your house. I said, okay, I don't know that much about Lutherans or anything, you know. I've heard of Martin Luther. And he said, I said, well, okay. He said, well, we don't have a pastor here in our Lutheran church. I said, okay. And he says, it's my turn as chairman of the board to fill the pulpit on Sundays and to have preachers come in and preach. And he says, I'd like to have you, if you'd come over on a Sunday morning. I know you're not having meetings yet, and so if you could come over on a Sunday morning, that'd be great. I said, I thought, well, there's been a big mistake here. I said, sir, I am a Baptist pastor. And he said, well, we're desperate. We'll take anything we can get. That's what he told me. I said, okay. I said, I'm a loud Baptist pastor. And he said, well, we're not used to that. He said, but that's okay. If you just come and give us a Sunday, you could fill the pulpit. I said, mark me down, buddy. I'll come out there and preach. And so I went the Sunday before I was scheduled to preach. And so because I don't know what they do in the Lutheran church. So I go in this place, and there was about 25 people there, had a balcony in the building, pretty little place, not many people there. They had a guy filling in that day who told them they were going to heaven because they had been baptized and confirmed Lutheran. And I thought, my goodness, these people are going to pass out when I come out here, because he never got above, he was not this loud as I'm talking to you now. And so what had happened is I was supposed to be there the following Sunday. What had happened is the word had gotten out in that town that the guy who talks funny and the guy starting a cult in his garage is candidating for pastor at the Lutheran church. Wow. So when my wife and my family walked around to that Lutheran church, it was packed out. Everybody in that area, it seemed like, come to the church that day. Standing room only back there in the back. The balcony was completely full. They're not like Baptists. They don't have a wide open pulpit like what we're used to. They have a pulpit with a little door back here in the back. They box you in. Man, I come running out of that door. When God got a hold of me of preaching, I come running out of that door, and I got down in between the pews and got to preaching to those folks, those Lutherans, and God put some of those folks under Holy Ghost conviction. And listen, later on, we got to see some of those folks that went to that Lutheran church. They go to Calvary Baptist Church today. And the Lord used us to establish a church there in that town. Chamberlain was the county seat without a Bible preaching church in that area. This time, we're going back to the town of DeSmet. Anybody heard of DeSmet, South Dakota? You've heard of Little House on the Prairie. You've heard of Laura Ingalls Wilder. That's where she lived for a long time. As a matter of fact, Pa Ingalls, who my daughter really loves, from the show, is said to have helped build the building that we're going to get started in. It was on an old Episcopal church, and a missionary 60 miles away was trying to reach DeSmet, saw this building for sale, and this is the building right here in DeSmet, and he saw it for sale. God spoke to his heart, And he raised the money, and they purchased his church that he's pastoring, purchased this building. And little did he know, at the same time, God was working on my heart to go back. When I announced that the Earwood family was going back to South Dakota, he called me and he said, I want you to pray about something. I met him in this town of DeSmet and saw that. Now, I was just up there not even 2 weeks ago, and you see that top part just below the cross there. All of that is primered now. I got up in a lift, they rented a lift, and I got a coat of primer on all of that. And they've got the yellow part has got a top coat of paint on it now. Now, since this building, I don't know if you got any pictures on the inside. I know you saw one while ago. But since these pictures were taken, see how empty it is? There's pews in there right now.
What about that?
Because a church in Chicago, Illinois gave that pastor, Brother Lamar Whittemore. Do you know him? Okay, he's the one that purchased this building. And see that's the back of, that's standing in the pulpit looking in the back. But right now, a church in Chicago gave Brother Lamar Whittemore some pews. He went up there and got them. It has pews in it now, has a piano in it now, has songbooks in it now, ready to have church. And this is where we're going. This is where we're going to get started. And there in the town of DeSmet. DeSmet is the county seat. There's tiny little towns around DeSmet. And there is not a Bible preaching church in that county. That's where we're going. When I grew up in old-fashioned feet-washing Baptist churches, that's how I grew up. I thank God for it too. I could have never have imagined as a little boy that anybody in America did not have a King James Bible.
You're right, brother.
I couldn't imagine it. I thought everybody in America had a Bible like me. I thought everybody had a church like me. And you ain't got to leave America to find towns, hundreds of towns, 33 counties in South Dakota. And if I'm not mistaken, 22 of them do not have a Bible preaching church in it. And that's what God has called us to do. This is the inside as well. You can see probably the stained glass windows in this place are worth more than the building.
Wow.
But this is where we're going to get started. And see, if you'll just scroll on through those here and look at some pictures of the building. I've got a couple of videos that I want you to watch, and I'll sit down and get out of the way. And then I think we're going to come up and sing. But you can see how really pretty it is. This building sits right on the Highway 25, right in the heart of DeSmet. Everybody's been asking questions about this building, what's going to happen to it. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. The gospel's going to get preached right there. Ain't that something? You say right here in America? Yep, right there, right here in America, right there in that town, in that county is not a Bible preaching church, but there's going to be. We started deputation in October. I went full time in March, and I'm already at 50% of needed support. Ain't that a blessing? Already halfway there. So if you'll go to those testimonies now.
I can remember the first time that I ever even heard the word saved. Pastor Earwood had knocked on our trailer house door and just asked me, he said, "Can I ask you something? Have you ever been saved?" And I had never heard that term before. And I thought I could scare him off by first telling him I was Catholic, went to Catholic school my whole life, and he said, "Sorry about that." And then the next thing I thought I could definitely scare him off by telling him I was Indian, because, you know, I thought maybe that would scare him, but it didn't. And my husband's grandparents attended Calvary Baptist Church in its infancy. They were some of the charter members, and they used to talk about Pastor and Melissa and their kids and how they sang, and they just were so fond of them, and we'd visit. And at any rate, my husband's grandfather ended up passing away, and we went to the funeral, and it's the first time I've ever heard the gospel preached. And I can remember Pastor Earwood saying, holding up a Bible and saying, "There's no such place as purgatory. You'll not find that word anywhere in this Bible." And I was shocked by that. I was raised literally in Catholic church. I went to Catholic Mass every day of my life. That's what you do when you go to Catholic school. And so after the service, and when we left, actually, my mother-in-law said to me, he said, Dad would have loved that. Dad would have wanted the salvation message preached, which meant nothing to me. I just kind of smiled and nodded. I really didn't know what that meant. And I went home. Granddad and Grandma had given me a King James Bible because I had bought the wrong one. And I looked for purgatory in case he was wrong, and he was right. I didn't find it. And that Sunday we were in church, and we heard preaching for the first, altar call actually. And I got so nervous, and my heart was racing, and I thought, this guy's crazy, and what's going on? And I was so uncomfortable, and I didn't go forward. But we kept coming back, and I think it was about the third Sunday in church, and he gave an altar call. And when I was there, I would remember thinking, oh, I love church. Oh, but I forgot about this part. And he was doing the altar call, and my son, he was 6. He got up, and he went forward, and he got saved. And he came back to the pew, and Pastor said, I just really feel the burden to extend this altar call. And as soon as he said that, I got up, and I thought, if my son can put his pride aside at 6, I'm supposed to be an example to him. And I'm sitting here, and I went forward, and I got saved. And I didn't know what all it meant, but I thank God. 10 years later, I'm in church, and my kids are serving God, and they're in church and working for God, and it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing, and I'm so thankful that the Earwoods listened when God called them and brought them to South Dakota. A whole family's going to heaven, and you'll see us there someday.
I got kind of the same, started going to church as my wife. We never really went much as kids. We'd go from time to time when my granddad was home for the weekends, but that was about it. And when I was growing up, and I never went to church or really cared, or I lived wild and did what I want when I wanted and how I wanted to do it. And I bought a house in Puckwana, and I was working on it, and my granddad always told us that there's a church over there that he went to, and he wanted us to go with them, and I'd never go with him. And then he passed away, and Pastor Earwood preached his funeral, and just like my wife, is the first time I ever heard the gospel, and I just ignored it. But we started going to church with Grandma after that because she wanted us to go with her, and I basically went because I felt guilty for not going before he died. So I just started going, and Pastor would stand up and preach and give altar calls, and I just ignored it. And about 3 or 4 weeks of going to church, I just kept ignoring my conviction, and one night I just couldn't sleep, and I just knew if I died I'd go to hell, and I needed to get saved. So I just prayed in my bed and got saved. And after that, he started teaching us disciple classes, and me and my wife now, we weren't married then, and I told her that we either had to get married or I was moving out, because I knew it wasn't right. So the next, I think is 3 days later, we went and got married, and we've been married ever since, and we got good kids and still got a good church to go to. We had some tough times. The Earwoods thought it was necessary to leave us, but I'm glad they're coming back, and I just pray that you guys will help them get back, and maybe some more people like me will get saved.